Down in Lexington, Kentucky, this young lady was sitting outside of her hotel room with her husband inside when a couple of the fellas, these two guys, saw her sitting there with her purse. They got out of their car. They tried to steal her purse. They shot her. They killed her husband, a member of the United States Marine Corps. That was 4 years ago. A couple weeks ago, they finally convicted them, not on murder, but on robbery. And so, in other words, somehow these guys came up and robbed this couple, and then after the robbery was over, somehow maybe the couple shot themselves. Or maybe somebody else came along and shot them. So this is another example of the Bronx jury, what we saw just a couple days ago in New York in the case of Carino Ventano. The jury found the suspect not guilty despite DNA evidence and a confession. So the Bronx jury says that a black jury will tend not to convict black people of a crime, even when you have evidence. What they do often, they'll convict on a lesser crime. So in New York, in the Ventano case, they just kicked that guy loose on a hung jury. They're going to have to retry him on lesser charges, most likely. And here down in Kentucky, well, this woman lost the love of her life, and these guys are just sitting there laughing.
While you were sitting outside, did some people approach you?
Yes, they did.
Tell us about that.
So when I looked up, I saw a man walking towards me with a gun, started to take my purse off, and at that point he had gotten closer and grabbed the purse from me and pulled it off.
What happens at that point?
I heard a gunfire and I fell to the ground. Jonathan had told me to run. He was hiding.
And then what happens in the scuffle between the two of them?
Jonathan was shot. I tried to get to Jonathan and I couldn't. Because I had been shot.
Where were you shot?
My left leg.
We talk a lot about Bronx juries in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. We show cases from all over the country where Bronx juries are happening, where people talk about Bronx juries. We did a story, mentioned a story a few weeks ago about a Bronx jury where another service member, a woman who is a member of the United States Navy, 5 fellas killed her. They had the whole thing. They had fingerprints, they had weapons, they had testimony. Got to trial. One of the jurors walked in the jury room and said, listen, a black juror walked into the jury room and said, listen, I'm not voting to send another black man to prison. This was on a national newscast. This is on that CBS newscast called 48 Hours, not the one where they solve crimes in 48 hours. There's 2 shows called 48 Hours. That's a Bronx jury. And so whenever we hear somebody talk about numbers, and the numbers are crazy out of whack, even as it is, wildly out of proportion, black crime, black violence, wildly out of proportion. But whenever we hear people talk about that, and they don't talk about how Bronx juries makes really, really bad numbers, and the true numbers are even worse. So we got Bronx juries. What about witness intimidation? What about stitches for snitches? What about stopping the cradle to prison pipeline? What about mayors all over America now and people who believe in criminal justice reform, including people in the Oval Office and the White House, are looking at us in the eye and say there's too many black people in prison for no reason whatsoever except for white racism.
Please, sir, I want some more.
And so they're arresting fewer people, stopping fewer people, charging fewer people, convicting fewer people. And then when they crank the numbers down artificially, they look a year later, they come to us, look us in the eye and say, Colin, the numbers are down. Why don't you know anything about the numbers, Colin? The numbers are part of the biggest lie of this generation, the hoax of black victimization. Everybody's doing everything they can to crank these numbers down, push them down, shove them down, compress them down, put them in a vice and squeeze them down. All because they don't want to make the black kids angry.